There's a certain silence that terrifies people. Not the silence of weakness, but the silence of someone who's finally done explaining. Have you ever seen it? A person who doesn't raise their voice, doesn't argue, doesn't plead. They simply take one step back and suddenly, everything shifts. The air gets heavier. Eyes begin to search for what's missing. Control slips through trembling fingers. Dominance begins to crumble quietly. That's the power of withdrawal. It's not about running away. It's about reclaiming your energy from places that feed on your reactions. You stop being predictable, you stop being accessible, and in that stillness, people start to feel the weight of their own noise. When you no longer chase, explain, or react, the world around you begins to distort. They were used to your emotional availability, to the comfort of your patterns, to the reflex that always came when they pushed a certain way. But the day you choose silence over defense, the rules collapse. No one knows what you'll do next. And that mystery, that's control. Those who once thought they understood you will realize they never truly knew you at all. Carl Jung once said, "The things that irritate us about others can lead us to a deeper understanding of ourselves." Think about that. Because when you finally become distant, when your silence grows, watch carefully who starts to panic, who becomes restless, who tries to provoke you, who needs your reaction to feel alive. Their behavior will tell you everything. It's never really about you. It's about what your absence exposes in them. That's the hidden truth. Control is rarely loud. It's woven into habits, expectations, emotional triggers. It disguises itself as care, attention, urgency. But what it feeds on is your predictability. When you stop being constantly available, the illusion collapses. Not because they love you, not because they value you, but because they can no longer use you. They were addicted to your reactions, to the way you explained yourself, to how you tried to fix what was never your fault. Every time you rushed to please, every time you justified, you handed them quiet permission to own your peace. You didn't do it out of weakness. You did it out of fear. Fear of losing a validation that never truly existed. And when that realization hits, you stop chasing it. You stop apologizing for your silence. You start observing instead of reacting. That's when real power begins. Not in resistance, not in argument, but in the calm withdrawal that forces others to face the emptiness they used to fill with you. Every time you said yes when you wanted to say no. Every time you replied just to avoid being misunderstood. Every time you explained yourself to someone committed to misunderstanding you, you gave away fragments of your energy, pieces of your peace. Until one day, all that remained was fatigue, a hollow ache you couldn't name. Carl Jung called it silent self-betrayal, the quiet suicide of the spirit that happens every time you abandon your truth to keep something already dead alive. You tell yourself it's love. You tell yourself it's kindness. But it's not. It's fear wearing a mask of loyalty. You're not loved because you're always available. You're used because you're easy. They don't stay for who you are. They stay for the comfort your presence provides, the distraction you offer from their own emptiness. You've become their lifeboat, carrying souls too weak to swim through their own shadows. And you feel it, you know it, yet you pretend not to, because the truth terrifies you more than the lie ever did. You're afraid of being alone, of being called cold, distant, heartless. But tell me what's lonelier than being surrounded by people who only love the version of you that serves them. That's the quiet tragedy of self-betrayal. The more predictable you are, the easier you are to control. And every time you give in, you trade another piece of your worth for approval that was never real. If these words strike something deep within you, pause for a moment and hit like it's not for me, it's for you. A small act of reclaiming your awareness. And if you're ready to go further, subscribe, because what's coming next will take you deeper into the shadows of your own truth. Have you ever asked yourself why we keep sacrificing ourselves for people who were never worth the cost? The answer hides beneath something Carl Jung called the persona, the mask we wear each day. Not to live truthfully, but to survive acceptance. To be loved. To avoid being cast out into the quiet isolation we fear most. So we smile while our hearts fracture. We nod when every part of us wants to scream. We reply to messages at midnight, not out of care, but out of terror that silence might make us seem cold. We bend, we please, we perform, telling ourselves it's strength when it's really fear in disguise. Fear of being left behind. Fear of losing the image of goodness we've spent years constructing. Fear of what might remain if we ever stop pretending. And every time we wear that mask, we drift a little further from who we are. A little further from the raw truth beneath the performance. Until one day, we forget the sound of our own voice, buried under the noise of all the versions we thought we had to become. Each time you betray your true feelings, you teach the world that your feelings don't matter. Every forced smile, every swallowed word, every moment you pretend it's fine when it isn't, you're training others to believe you don't deserve gentleness. And then one day, you wake up and meet a stranger in the mirror. Someone tired, someone dimmed. A soul drained from giving too much and being seen too little. Carl Jung warned, if you wear a mask for too long, you forget who you are underneath. That's the danger of endless availability, of constant reaction. It keeps the mask alive. You stop living. You start performing, playing the role others expect, moving to the rhythm of their comfort, not your truth. And somewhere along the way, you mistake validation for value. A message replied to instantly feels like proof that you matter. A compliment feels like oxygen. A temporary approval becomes your pulse. You start measuring your worth in fragments, tiny, fragile signals that vanish as quickly as they arrive. But if you've made it this far, pause. Ask yourself, am I still living as myself, or have I become a character in someone else's play? And if your heart whispers that you're ready, take this moment as your quiet rebellion. Click like not for me, but to mark your awakening. Subscribe not as a follower, but as a soul reclaiming its path. Because true freedom doesn't come from being loved. It comes from removing the mask and meeting the person you've hidden beneath it. The truth is darker than most will admit. People don't love you for who you are. They love the function you provide. You think they stay because you're kind, genuine, always there when needed. But the truth, the cold, unsettling truth is, they don't love you. They love the way you make them feel about themselves. They love the feeling you give them, the warmth, the comfort, the safety of being understood. They love the attention, the way you make them feel seen when the world ignores them. They love your willingness to help, your endless patience, your quiet availability that whispers, I'm here, no matter what. What they love isn't you, it's the reflection of themselves in your kindness. The illusion of importance you create just by caring. But what happens when the giver grows tired? When the well runs dry? When the one who always listens finally needs to be heard? You start to pull back, softly, silently. You wait just once for someone to notice the weight you carry. But the silence that follows is louder than any scream. Because the truth reveals itself in that moment when you need them, they vanish. The same people who once reached for your light will turn away from your shadow. And you realize painfully and clearly, they never loved you. They only loved the feeling of being loved by you. Suddenly you become difficult, cold, not like you used to be. Not because you did something wrong, but because you no longer serve a function for them. You were once their emotional dumping ground. The one who kept their loneliness at bay. The emotional support when they were weak. But when you start holding your energy for yourself, they don't know what to do with you anymore. They don't know how to love your true self. Only the role you once played. And that's when you realize you were never loved as a human being. You were consumed like a product. Carl Jung once said, we do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And the truth you've just touched is a part of that darkness. It's not comfortable. It's not sweet, but it's liberating. Because when you understand this, you will stop seeking love by serving. You will stop believing that endless kindness is the path to someone's heart. And you will begin asking a different question, a deeper, harder, but far more necessary question. If I stopped doing things for them, would they still stay? If that question makes you fall silent for a few seconds, then maybe you've come far enough to start the journey back to yourself. Hit like if you're ready to stop being the nice one for others. And press subscribe if you're ready to become the real one for yourself. True worth isn't measured by how useful you are to others. It's revealed when you're respected, even in your stillness, when you offer nothing but presence and yet remain untouchable. 4. The world does not respect those who react easily. It respects those who don't flinch. You think your reactions are choices, that every outburst, every explanation, every defense is your will in motion. It's not. Most of the time, you're just following a script that someone else wrote for you long ago. And the cruelest part? They barely have to lift a finger to make you dance. A subtle jab, a delayed reply, a silence that lingers a little too long, and suddenly your peace burns. You spiral. You explain. You plead. You fight invisible battles to prove you still matter. But here's the truth. The moment you react, you surrender the throne. You hand them the remote control to your emotions. You say without words, I'm still yours to disturb. And they do, not through cruelty, not through noise, but through quiet manipulation. They press the buttons you left exposed. They watch you collapse and whisper, see, you're the problem. Carl Jung called it projection, the art of making you carry the parts of them they can't face. Their fear becomes your guilt. Their weakness becomes your anger, and you keep playing the role they need you to play. That's why silence isn't avoidance, it's power. It's rebellion. It's the refusal to keep dancing to someone else's rhythm. Silence is when you stop explaining and start observing. It's when you stop defending and start detaching. It's when you finally understand peace is not found in proving your innocence, but in refusing to react at all. Silence is the declaration. I will no longer allow my emotions to be controlled. Have you noticed how some people panic when you stop responding? They're not panicking because they've lost you. They're panicking because they've lost control over you. As long as you keep talking, defending, explaining, you're still playing their game. But when you fall silent, the rules shift. Suddenly, they can't predict you. They can't feed off your reactions. They're forced to face the discomfort of their own emptiness. And that's when your silence becomes louder than any argument ever could. If these words strike something deep within you, pause for a moment, breathe and recognize this awakening. Because sometimes, it's your silence that becomes the voice that demands respect, forcing the world to change how it treats you. 5. True power lies in not reacting. If silence makes others lose control, then not reacting is the ultimate weapon. You once believed power meant winning the argument, firing back fast, never letting anyone have the last word. But you were wrong. True power doesn't come from what you say, it comes from what you choose not to say. Not reacting isn't weakness, and it isn't avoidance. It's an act of mastery, a conscious choice to stay grounded when someone tries to drag you into chaos. Because when someone provokes you, their goal isn't always to win, it's to occupy your mind. To make you spiral, to drain your peace, to make you dance to their tune. But when you don't react, you protect something sacred, your mental space, your energy, your control. And in that stillness, something powerful happens. They are left alone with themselves, with their own emptiness, their own insecurities, their own noise. And that's a silence most people can't handle. As Carl Jung once emphasized, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. A person with inner strength is not agitated by the external world. They hold their center even amidst chaos. When you stay silent, when you choose to observe rather than react, you're doing something rare, something almost sacred. You're mastering yourself. And that quiet mastery carries weight. Heavier than any loud word, sharper than any argument. It unsettles those who once fed on your reactions. It makes manipulators hesitate. It earns you a quiet kind of respect, the kind you never have to ask for. But mastering non-reaction isn't easy. It takes practice, discipline. You have to learn to sit in the fire of discomfort, to let misunderstanding burn without explaining yourself, to be provoked and yet unmoved. Not reacting doesn't mean you can, it means you no longer need to. You've grown past the need to prove your strength through noise. You've realized not every battle deserves your energy, not every word deserves a reply. Not every insult deserves a defense. True steadiness is silent, confidence, the kind that comes when you know your worth doesn't depend on anyone's perception. So if you're ready to step into that state, that calm awareness, that quiet power, take this moment to acknowledge it. Because real power has never been about control over others. It's about control over yourself. And the highest form of control is silence. 6. The silent transformation from reactivity to inner sovereignty. And then after all the moments you chose silence, after all the times you chose not to react, something will begin to happen within you. Very slowly, very deeply, very truly. Transformation, not loud, not visible, but unfolding like an underground current within your mind. You stop craving to be understood. You stop chasing validation through replies, through compliments, through approval that never truly fed your soul. Instead, you begin to step into a new state, calm, centered, untouchable. The state of someone who no longer depends on the reactions of others to feel whole. You start to see the patterns, the people, the emotional traps, the familiar chaos that once pulled you apart. You see it all, And this time, you don't flinch. Because now you understand the pain was never truth. It was illusion. It was your own mind, spinning stories that kept you bound. Carl Jung called this individuation the sacred return to the self. The process of becoming whole, authentic, free, no longer a reflection of others' expectations. No longer defined by how they feel about you. You begin to look inward, not outward. And in that silence, something divine unfolds. You observe without judgment. You choose who gets to stand near your peace. You start removing those who drain you, not with anger, not with noise, but with stillness. You no longer need revenge to reclaim power. You no longer need apologies to heal. You no longer need attention to exist. You only need one thing: your own awareness. Because once you have that, no one owns you anymore. Clarity. And where does that clarity come from? It comes from no longer reacting, from living anchored within your own center, instead of being pulled apart by the noise of the outer world. At this point, you stop wanting to win. You just want peace. You stop needing to be right. You just want to stay whole. You stop craving validation. You just want to know who you truly are. That's when you enter what I call intentional absence. You are present, but not available on demand. You observe, but you no longer judge. You are silent, but fully awake. If you can feel this shift stirring inside you, pause. Hit like not for me, but to acknowledge that you are no longer who you used to be. And press subscribe to keep walking this path of becoming someone who is no longer controlled by the world, but who builds an inner world so strong, no one can invade it. Because when you stop reacting, you begin seeing clearly. When you stop pleasing, you begin mastering. And when you stop needing to fit in, you finally begin to exist. 7. Active silence, the ultimate weapon. After you've withdrawn, after you've detached from the roles others wrote for you, something profound emerges: intentional silence. Not the silence of the hurt, not the silence of anger, but the silence of mastery. The silence of someone who no longer has anything left to prove. And in that state, you no longer need to fight. Your mere presence becomes the declaration. You don't need to argue to be heard. You don't need to react to be respected. Because silence, when it comes from awareness, commands attention. People aren't afraid of shouting. They fear the silence of a mind they can't predict. When you fall silent, others are forced to face themselves. With no one left to attack, they hear the noise inside their own heads, and that's what truly terrifies them. Carl Jung once wrote, "Silence is not the absence of something, but the presence of everything." That's the essence of this power. Silence removes you from the story others tried to trap you in. It lets you see who's genuine and who's acting, who loves you, and who only uses you to fill their emptiness. And once you learn to sit with your own silence, you'll see you were never lonely. You were just coming home to yourself. Silence becomes your sword and your shield. It's not weakness, it's precision. It's choosing peace over meaningless arguments, clarity over chaos. And ironically, the moment you stop speaking, the world starts listening. If your silence has ever been mistaken for weakness, remember this: the right kind of silence, born from self-awareness, is an attack no one can block. Hit like if you've ever risen in silence. Subscribe to continue your journey toward inner sovereignty. Because when you no longer need words to be respected, you've reached the highest form of power. 8. Loneliness. No longer a punishment, but a rebirth. When you choose silence, when you stop reacting, when you step out of emotional games, there comes a phase you can't skip: loneliness. At first, it cuts deep. You'll feel hollow, detached, almost guilty for your peace. The people who once surrounded you will grow distant, quiet, uncomfortable with the new version of you. It will feel like loss, but it's not. You're not losing anyone real. You're losing illusions. You're losing the connections that depended on your availability, your reactions, your compliance. When you withdraw, those false bonds dissolve. And that's not a sign of failure, it's evidence of evolution. Carl Jung called this sacred loneliness, the stage where you are pulled away from the crowd, not because you are broken, but because you are being refined. Loneliness stops being a cage and becomes a sanctuary. It becomes the quiet temple where you finally meet yourself again. There are no expectations there, no noise, no manipulation, just you and the truth you've avoided your entire life. Because only in solitude do you realize you were never meant to be understood by everyone. You were meant to understand yourself. There is only your rawness complete. At first, the silence will terrify you. It will feel like you've lost everything: people, purpose, connection. But if you are brave enough to stay in that emptiness, something beautiful happens. You begin to see that you haven't lost anything real. You've only lost what was never truly yours to begin with. You no longer crave validation to feel seen. You no longer chase love to feel whole. You stop needing approval to believe in your own worth. The glances, the praise, the temporary warmth, they all fade. And yet somehow, you feel lighter. You start to cherish your own presence like sacred ground. You learn how to walk alone without feeling lonely. You learn how to sit in an empty room and feel surrounded by peace, by clarity, by yourself. Because for the first time, you are not waiting for someone to choose you. You have chosen you. If you've ever walked through that kind of darkness, if you're in it now, hear this: you are not lost. You are being reborn. The pain you feel isn't destruction, it's transformation. Like if you understand that loneliness isn't killing you, it's carving out the stronger, deeper version of who you were always meant to be. And subscribe to continue your journey toward awakening, toward the freedom that begins when you no longer fear losing anyone because you have finally found yourself. Because voluntary loneliness is not punishment. It is initiation, the sacred gateway to true freedom. 9. The price and reward of becoming less accessible. When you decide to stop being easily accessible, you will pay a price. You will lose people. The ones who depended on your constant yes, your instant replies, your emotional labor, they will fall away. You'll hear it in their voices. You've changed. You're cold. You're not the same anymore. And they'll be right. You have changed. You've stopped being their convenience. But understand this: you are not becoming cruel. You are becoming conscious. You are no longer willing to perform the role others assigned you. You're no longer available on demand for people who were never truly there for you. And that shift will expose everything. It will show you who loved you and who only loved your usefulness. There will be nights when you doubt yourself, when the silence feels too heavy, when you wonder if you were too harsh, too distant, too different. But stay with it, don't retreat. Because if you can walk through that emptiness without panic, you'll discover something rare: you didn't lose anyone real. You were purified. And what remains after that purification is gold. You'll see clearly the ones who stay because they value you. Not your effort, not your help, not your availability. Just you. And that is the moment you finally understand. Solitude doesn't strip you of love. It filters it, leaving behind only what's true. The relationships that survive this transformation will be different. They won't be built on need, manipulation, or temporary emotional comfort. They'll be built on mutual respect, on presence without demand, on honesty without exploitation. And most importantly, through all the silence, all the loss, all the letting go, you will begin to rebuild the most sacred relationship of all, the one with yourself. Carl Jung once said, "The path to maturity passes through loneliness, and that loneliness is not the absence of others, but the presence of yourself." That's the truth most people never reach. Because when you are no longer easily accessible, when you no longer give your energy away freely, the world has no choice but to treat you differently. No more late-night messages from people who only remember you when they need something. No more calls that drain you under the disguise of just talking. No more one-sided connections where you carry the full weight of keeping something dead alive. Instead, what remains is what's real, what's deep, what's worthy. The connections that survive will feel lighter, purer, built on respect, not expectation. And as that happens, something powerful shifts inside you. You stop begging to be seen and start seeing yourself. If you're walking this path, if you're feeling both the ache and the freedom of sovereign withdrawal, pause for a second. Hit like to affirm that you are moving in the right direction. And press subscribe to continue your journey of becoming someone who no longer seeks acceptance from the world, but builds completeness from within. Because when you are no longer easily accessible, you don't just become more valuable to others, you become irreplaceable to yourself. 10. Loneliness, a phase of rebirth. When you step through the door of loneliness, the world falls eerily silent. You're no longer part of the old, but not yet home in the new. It's a liminal space, a quiet void where nothing feels solid. You'll feel disoriented, detached, almost hollow. You'll think you've lost everything, but don't panic. Don't rush back to what's familiar just because it's comfortable. That emptiness isn't your enemy, it's your rebirth. What feels like dying is actually becoming. The loneliness you're walking through is the cradle, where a new version of you is being shaped slowly, silently, sacredly. A self no longer built from the need to be loved. A self no longer defined by the gaze or approval of others. In the silence of loneliness, something awakens. Faint whispers rise from the depths, forgotten dreams, buried instincts, pieces of your soul you traded away just to belong. They return now, gently, asking for recognition. And there you stand, caught between two worlds, holding the most important choice of your life. Keep running from your own depth, or finally turn toward it. Because on the other side of loneliness is not emptiness, it's truth. Carl Jung once said, "We do not become enlightened by running from the pain, but by facing it, embracing it, and allowing it to shape who we truly are." Loneliness, when faced instead of feared, transforms. It stops being a curse and becomes a purifying fire, burning away what is false, stripping off every mask, every illusion, every borrowed identity, until only one thing remains, your truest self. And then something changes. Silence no longer feels threatening. Absence no longer feels like loss. Uncertainty no longer feels like danger. Because now, you no longer need the world to tell you who you are. You walk alone, but each step radiates quiet power. You speak less, but every word lands with weight. You appear less, but each presence leaves an imprint that lingers long after you're gone. If you're standing in this phase right now, between endings and beginnings, don't turn back. Don't retreat into the noise. This is your silent rebirth. Hit like to mark this awakening, and press subscribe to continue walking the path toward becoming a free human being, unbound by expectations, untouched by fear, unshaken by loneliness. Because loneliness is not the end, it's the sacred invitation into your own kingdom. Conclusion: freedom is born from loneliness. You've walked through silence. You've endured the hollow ache of detachment. You've watched people drift away, watched identities crumble, watched yourself shed layers you once thought were permanent. You stopped reacting. You stopped pleasing. You stopped explaining. And in return you gained something no one can give and no one can take away. Freedom, not the illusion of freedom that depends on validation, attention, or belonging, but true freedom. The kind that lives inside you. The kind that stands quietly, unshakably, in its own truth. The kind that whispers, "I am whole, even when I am alone." Freedom to choose. Freedom to love without clinging. Freedom to walk away without resentment. You begin to realize something profound: you don't need to always be present to be loved. You don't need to always explain yourself to be accepted. You don't need to hold on to those who are already willing to let you go. You only need one thing: yourself whole, grounded, and complete. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. But you have faced it. You have walked through it. You have endured the silence, the distance, the pain of detachment, and because of that, no one can ever again control you with silence, rejection, or withdrawal. You have mastered the art of being still with yourself, and the one who knows how to be still with himself will never again be anyone's prey." If this journey has awakened something within you, leave a comment below. Tell me, where are you on your path? Are you just beginning to withdraw, or are you deep into the silence, quietly rebuilding yourself, piece by piece? Share your story. Because when you write it down, you're not just sharing it with me, you're reaching others who are also walking their silent paths, fighting unseen battles, trying to find themselves in a noisy world. And remember, when you no longer need anyone to feel complete, you become a force the world cannot move. That is where your real beginning starts.